Alrighty, so we're gonna get started. This is gonna be either episode probably 6 or 7, depending on how long I wait for the actual project to finish of Artist Shooting Artist. For those new to the show, this is pretty much my goal to seek out traditional and non-traditional forms of art. And today I have Cliff Stotts on of Stotts Family Brewery, something making beers.
Yeah.
He is a beer maker, which, as you can tell, we are enjoying a few beers. And I thought I'd kind of talk to him about the process and what you can kind of look at it when you're making some beer. So thanks for coming on today.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I guess my first question is, getting into making beers, like what first got you, what made you take the jump from just drinking beers to start making your own beers?
Well, I think it kind of came from, it's fun to play around with the different ingredients. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of non-traditional types of beer out there that, you can't get. It's not easy to find a beer that has apricot in it or whatever. You have your traditional beers that have your, orange wheats and things like that. It's becoming more prevalent now to find beers with weirder ingredients.
Yeah.
Like we talked about earlier, beer with a pizza beer with oregano and those kind of flavors into it. And
sounds delicious.
And then, but what really got me into brewing my own beer was there's a brew from Kona Brewing Company called Cocoa Brown that they use a toasted coconut in.
Oh, wow.
It's one of my favorite beers, but they only brew it one time a year. You can only get it for a couple months, and then it's gone until next year. And I felt that was unacceptable for me. So my first beer I ever brewed was a brown ale with toasted coconut. And then you just, it didn't come out very well. It came out okay. You didn't get a lot of the coconut flavor, but then that kind of got me into, well, now I have to make it again and try the coconut in a different way. And just I kind of went from there. I've never really made just a straight beer flavored beer. I've always done, like I said, toasted coconut or apricot, or like my Russian Imperial with vanilla beans and cocoa nibs.
Ooh, that sounds delicious.
Things like that. It gives you the opportunity of playing with ingredients that you wouldn't normally see in beers.
Well, that's really cool. So to backtrack a little bit, you're working on a oatmeal stout right now. So like an oatmeal kind of based beer in terms of like the taste and flavoring.
Right.
And it's cool because I feel like, you think about beers, and obviously you have like traditional beers that you can go to like the grocery store and whatever you can buy. But the ability for a lot of people now to like have an idea like, oh, like I want to make a beer that tastes like grapes, or I want to make a beer that tastes like maybe like a donut. I don't know. But for people to kind of make that jump, people to go out and do that is a very cool way to, I guess, expand the horizon of like, tasting in the beer world. Mm-hmm. So that's cool. I mean, it's exciting to see someone who's like, oh, like there's this beer I really like. It's only once a year. Why not try to make my own? And obviously, like any sort of like art form or like anything, really, most of the time when you first start something, it's going to suck. Like you're like, oh, okay, give it a shot, whatever. But I mean, that's part of the excitement is like you go through this process, you do all this work and you kind of figure stuff out and like, okay, this is not exactly how I want it to taste, but now I know a little bit how I want to try it this way next time, and really refining the process, which, I mean, that's probably part of, I guess, would be the enjoyment of the whole thing is the ability to, it's not the journey. It's not the journey is the destiny. Like it's the whole process that really gets you into like the final product. And especially something that you create, like, oh, like I made this beer, and obviously you can bring it, have friends drink and all that kind of good stuff. So that's really cool. So I guess, going for like, let's talk about actually making a beer. Like, is there, depending on the type of beer you're making, is there a difference in terms of like time frame, or are they all, I mean, they take about the same length to make? I mean, I guess depending, I would figure there'd be different variations on time depending on what type of beer you're making.
Mm-hmm. Well, the brewing process itself is pretty standardized. It's, hot water onto the grains to extract your sugars, adding your hops, and then letting it ferment. The only time it varies is if you're doing something specialty, for example, like I'm making a sour brown ale with cherries, and to add the bacteria to sour the beer, it takes a long time for that to become drinkable. Mm-hmm. You have to let those flavors kind of mellow out for a while, similar to making a very big beer, like a high alcohol beer. If you try and drink a high alcohol beer shortly after brewing it, it's going to have a really heavy alcohol flavor on the back end.
Yeah.
Whereas if you let that beer age for a while, 4 to 6 months or even a year, that alcohol flavor is going to kind of smooth itself out and mellow out. So it won't be so much like taking a shot when you're drinking a 10 or 12% beer or even higher.
Gotcha. You talk about sour beers. I feel like sour beers are kind of like the big thing right now.
Mm-hmm.
I never really heard about them, and I went out with my friends, and they were all ordering them. So like, what can you explain to me what a sour beer is, just for someone's like, oh, that's an interesting thing for a beer to taste like?
So a sour beer is it sounds like it tastes like it sounds. I mean, it's going to be sour. It's going to be tart. Most people think of, sour beer, that just sounds gross, but you kind of think of it as they're usually meant to be a little bit more refreshing, like a lemonade, for example.
Okay. Yeah.
A very traditional style of a sour beer is called a Berliner Weiss.
Okay.
And they were brewed to be a very low alcohol, 2 and 3% alcohol, meant to be drunk all day on a hot day.
Okay.
Very similar to like a lemonade. The sour beer craze is becoming more and more prevalent as more people are discovering it, and it's definitely an acquired taste. My wife, for example, doesn't really like sour beers.
Yeah.
But she also wasn't a beer drinker before we got into drinking beer. So it's the beer gets soured from in 2 ways, 2 different types of bacteria. There's one called lactobacillus and one called Brettanomyces. Lactobacillus is a naturally occurring bacteria in grain.
Okay.
So if your disinfectant processes weren't correct, then the beer would sour itself over time.
Okay.
Normally with beer, what a lot of people don't know about making beer is it's a very sterile process. You only want the flavors to be there that you put into it. Mm-hmm. If you let any outside things into your beer, it's going to change the flavor of it. So just like lactobacillus, it was kind of a naturally occurring thing. It comes out from unsterile procedures.
Cool. So essentially, I mean, a sour beer is just another, it has a particular name, but it's just another type of beer that you can, a taste you're looking for.
Right, yeah.
So I should drink more of them. I'm a big lemonade guy. So
just another flavor profile. You have to try the right ones, and I've tried some really bad ones, and I've tried some really good ones. So it's definitely an acquired taste. You just have to find the right ones that you like.
Like anything else. I remember when I first started drinking beer, I was just like, this is, you have a beer and it's kind of like, I think the first beer I ever had was a Guinness. And I don't know if that's necessarily the greatest beer to try first off. I remember it was really dark. I was like, this is disgusting. Like, why do people want to drink this? But, you go out with your friends and you keep trying stuff and, you find that one beer like, oh, this one's not too bad. Mm-hmm. And you kind of, obviously you build a taste and you go out and you find other beers and stuff. So I think it's a cool thing about drinking beer is there's a multitude of flavors out there to try. And what's really interesting, like when you talk about making your own beer, you brought up the point that, putting flavors into a beer, it's a very controlled and sterile process, like you said. Mm-hmm. So it's a very, you talk about like perfecting a flavor. I almost think of it as like a guitar player. They're always looking for like that perfect tone. And a lot of people do that. They have like massive like pedal boards and the specific ways to set their stuff up. It's like making a beer. Like you're very specific like ways you approach like what kind of hops you get or how long you do certain things or, exactly like what you let into your beer versus what you let out to your beer. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if people really realize just how important like every step in that process is and just how much variation you can probably get just by changing a thing, maybe a temperature by a degree or two or just the amount of a certain wheat or whatever. I mean, we were talking about with the stout we're making is the yeast. The yeast you got was the British
ale yeast.
And you haven't tried it before, but even that you were saying like people don't realize how important the yeast is to the process in terms of the flavoring. So in your beer making ventures, like what's the weirdest, has there been like a particular beer you've made? Like this is wild. Like I'm gonna try to make this. Like have you had like a really kind of out there beer you've attempted to make?
No, pretty. I don't want to say basic beers that I've been trying to make, but it's probably one of the weirder ones that I've tried to make would be a chocolate peanut butter stout.
Oh, okay.
And so trying to get peanut butter into or the peanut butter flavor into a beer is problematic because if you put you obviously can't put actual peanuts or peanut butter into the beer because A, it's not sanitary, and B, there's too much oil in it.
Okay, yeah, that would make sense.
The oil will kill the head, the foam on
Yeah.
the top of the beer. So I had to find out a different way to put it in. So the best thing I could come up with to put a peanut butter flavor into my beer was a coffee sweetener.
Uh-huh.
And it didn't really work out that way because I wanted more coffee flavor or more peanut butter flavor.
Uh-huh.
But the more peanut butter flavor you add, because it's a coffee sweetener, it made the beer sweeter, and I didn't want a really sweet beer.
Yeah.
And then also, to get the chocolate flavor, I added Hershey's cocoa powder,
Yeah.
which doesn't have any sugar into it.
That makes sense.
But the problem is, I put it in at bottling, so you wound up with a big old slug of cocoa powder at the bottom of your beer, and when you poured it into a glass, it was a hazy black.
Okay.
It was just not really appealing looking.
Yeah.
So the next time I do it, I'll add. I actually got powdered peanut butter.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know that was a thing.
I didn't know either. I guess it's pretty popular in protein shakes.
Oh, okay. That would make sense.
So you put powdered peanut butter, and then I'll put the cocoa powder into the beer and just let it sit there. And then when I bottle it, I'll take the beer off of that stuff. So it'll impart the flavor, but not necessarily the actual powders themselves.
Well, it's cool. I mean, just even, the process to which you experiment to find flavors, trying half and half. Like, it seems so almost obvious, but ingenious. Like, oh, I want like a chocolate flavored beer. Let's try cocoa powder. Like, you know what I mean? Just that kind of stuff, and the ability to. It almost feels like with the amount of flavors there are in the world, like the ability to create beers based on those flavors is almost endless. Like if you have a flavor you want, there's probably some way you can create it. I actually almost wonder if you could create a protein beer for people, like you go to the gym, you work out, and it's like, well, I kind of want a beer. Need to put on some muscle. Like, there's a protein beer for you. That'd be interesting.
Seems kind of counterproductive.
It does. I mean, maybe you can justify it. It's like, well, it's got a bunch of protein in it, so that's what I need after working out. So that's pretty cool, though. So is there a beer that you're maybe you want to try to create going forward, or something in your head that, I'd imagine like once you kind of get into this and you kind of like you make a few beers that are like, okay, like this is really good, like I really enjoy this, like you probably start thinking like, oh, that'd be a cool beer to make, or that'd be a cool beer to make. Do you have like one that's you're really itching to try to dive into?
Well, what I really want to do, what I've been talking about doing recently, is taking I only brew 5 gallons at a time.
Okay.
And what I really want to do is be able to split that batch into several smaller batches. So make a base beer.
Okay.
Like take our oatmeal stout, for example. Take that base beer, that base oatmeal stout, and then separate it in 1 gallon containers.
Okay.
So you say 5 1 gallon containers, and then so you leave one as your control subject, your base beer, no added flavoring, and then maybe try adding some cold brewed coffee to one, or maybe try adding some vanilla beans to one, or maybe some cocoa nibs to another one. And that way you can have your test,
Mm-hmm.
and then you can have, okay, well, this is the one with the cocoa nibs, or this is the one with the vanilla beans in. Okay, well, the base beer was better than the one with vanilla beans, so we'll kind of leave that one out. So I want to start doing things like that. I really want to do an IPA and split it and do some different things with an IPA.
Okay.
It just happened one day. I was drinking an IPA, one of my IPAs I made, and we were eating sushi with it. Kind of an odd combination to begin with, but
Yeah.
I ate a piece of the pickled ginger, drank some of the IPA, and it was an amazing flavor combination together. So I really want to make an IPA, add some pickled ginger to it, let it kind of sit there, and make a pickled ginger IPA. Never seen it before, never even heard of it before. So
It's funny because inspiration can strike anywhere. It's a very like eureka moment. It's like, oh man, like this is a great combination.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. And actually, it's funny too. Like the process by which you're trying to create these different beer flavors, if you control. It's like, man, you talk about being back in high school biology or the scientific method. I don't think people realize like how much is really involved into creating a good beer. Like let's try to see what we can have our base. And so the moral of the story is if you want to make beer, pay attention in science class. So, I feel like I've had friends who've gotten into beer making. What do you think is really... I feel like a lot more people are making their own beers these days. Do you think there's like a reason for this sudden jump in just like self-brewing or anything? Or
I think a lot of it has to do with just the expansion of craft beers in general. We're here in Corona. I can tell you about 15 craft breweries within 30 miles of this place. Mm-hmm. So I think the expansion of that, people going to different places, trying different beers, And those craft breweries being experimental maybe spark the enthusiasm of other people who want to experiment with something else. I had a chocolate peanut butter beer from this place, and well, maybe a dark chocolate peanut butter, or maybe a white chocolate peanut butter, or whatever it may be. I think that's really sparking the imagination of people who are drinking beer on a more regular basis.
That's cool. I mean, once again, I feel like it also comes back to the ability for people who want to try to create something, and and they can, like, being able to go out and create your own beers and try these new flavors, which is really, I mean, I think it's anytime people have the ability to go out and create their own stuff, be it any sort of, I guess, form. I think it's good. I think more creation is always good for development of like art or just everything in general. Like, why not be able to make more stuff? There's this funny argument because I do a lot of photography. People always claim like the iPhone or cell phones in general are killing like traditional photography because people are just using their phones.
Right.
But I mean, at the end of the day, like, a good picture is going to be a good picture. A good beer is going to be a good beer. So why not let other people? Maybe some people will never have got into making beers had they not tried some craft beer they had never had before. So they're just, why is it wrong having more stuff out there? A lot of people think having more stuff is going to dilute the product, but I like to be someone who thinks like having more stuff is going to really crystallize like what actually is really good and what's not as great, because you have so much stuff to choose from. You can see the gradation of like what's readily out there. So why is Budweiser the king of beers? I'm just kidding. You don't have to answer the question.
I don't think we need to go into it. We're getting way off topic.
Oh, way off topic there. Don't have enough time to talk about that. So moving on. So you talked about IPA. So what's up with IPAs? I am not a huge IPA fan, but I'm also not. I mean, I like beer. IPAs seem to be very popular. Do you know why? Is there a reason? Is it just kind of like, have they kind of just hit the scene? Because for the longest time, I didn't even know what IPA stood for. And I was like, is that a brand? Is IPA a thing? Finally kind of realized, oh, no, that's a type of beer. But, I mean, obviously, when it comes to beer and anything that you indulge yourself in, it's kind of come down to personal taste. So I take it you're a fan of IPAs.
I do like IPAs.
I guess what for you, like, what is it about IPA that you like? Like, is it, what really brings out the...
Well, again, like you touched on, IPA is a ridiculously popular style of beer nowadays, especially in the craft brewing scene. You go to any craft brewery, short of a couple, and they're going to have not only one, but maybe up to 3 or 4 or 5 different IPAs on tap. And again, it comes down to an acquired taste.
Yeah.
One of the big things that we're seeing in the craft beer industry right now is single hop IPAs.
Okay.
Normally, when you brew a beer, you brew an IPA, you use several different types of hops to do it. There's hops that are good for bittering, hops that are good for flavor and aroma. What you're seeing is a lot of people doing like just single hop all the way through. Like Citra is a very versatile hop. I don't personally like Citra because I think it tastes like cat pee.
All right.
But a lot of people really like that flavor.
Yeah.
I don't understand it, but
I'm sure there's a lot of mainstream beers that people will say like taste like cat pee and
right.
that are very, people buy all the time.
But
good beer pong beers, I assume, probably cheaper.
It's really an acquired taste. My wife is a big craft beer fan. She goes with me to every brewery that I go to. She tries all my beers that I brew. She's a real sport about the whole craft beer hobby that I have.
It's good because I don't know if people can tell, but all this stuff in the background is the process involved. So you probably need to have someone who's really like, all right, like let's do this thing.
It takes up quite a bit of space to brew on your own.
Yeah.
But going back to the IPAs, it's really an acquired taste. I don't like all IPAs. I don't like, some are good, some are bad, just like everything else. You kind of have to keep trying them until you find the one that you like, and then once you understand the flavors, like brewing beers has helped me understand the flavors of the IPAs, and I can pick out the different hops that they put into those IPAs, and it's really interesting at that point.
Very cool.
But one of the beers, like you talked about getting into brewing, one of the beers that I could not stand was Sierra Nevada Pale Ale.
Okay.
Because it's a pretty hoppy beer for being a traditional pale ale.
Yeah.
And I had a friend of mine that he would order it constantly, and it was heavy, bitter, grapefruit kind of flavors.
Yeah.
And I never liked it, never wanted to drink more of it. But then it happened. I got into beer, started drinking more and more beers, trying IPAs, got into IPAs. Now I drink a Sierra Nevada, and it's like, man, that's nothing. That's nothing from what I drink now.
Yeah.
So again, it's just an acquired taste. Some
Yeah.
people just don't enjoy that bitter flavor. Plus the different hops. I mean, they add so many different flavors depending on which ones you use. Some have a piney flavor. Some have like a dank, like a weed kind of flavor to them.
Goodness.
Some have a citrusy flavor.
Yeah.
So it really depends. You got to find the hops that you like. You got to find the beers that are brewed with the hops that you like.
Yeah.
It's a pretty tough thing to do.
Well, it's talk about evolving interests, evolving tastes, evolving flavors. I talked about how my first beer I ever had was a Guinness, and I was like, oh my god, this is never again. I had it was either this past St. Patty's Day or the one before. I was at a friend's house and they had a bunch of Guinness and I just wanted a beer. So I was like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to try it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. This is delicious. And it's just, as you encounter things, it's like steps. Like maybe starting on a really dark beer is not the best way for some people to really get into beer. But as you try a bunch of stuff and you kind of like refine your palate and you kind of go back to something, it's almost like when you're into like a type of music and then you find like a new band. It's like kind of similar. It's like, oh my gosh, like where has this been all my life? Or maybe you go back to a different band who you couldn't stand before, and as you've kind of refined your ear, refined what you're into, or just like as you get older, sometimes you're into different things, and it's kind of a cool process when you look at. Because you think, I mean. Maybe not as much to now like these days, but you think about beer, and I guess you almost like, what's the first thing that comes to mind a lot of times when you think of like beers? You think about maybe like dive bars or like college parties and stuff. But the craft beer scene is really it's kind of a big thing now. You go out, and I know in my area there's a lot of big craft beer areas that people hang out with, and it's really fun and it's inviting and everyone's like really fun to hang out with, and it's just become a lot more, I guess, mainstream in terms of like being craft beers being available. There's this tiny liquor store by my route when I go running, and it's like, oh, over 50 craft beers available, and it's like, I don't you wouldn't have seen that maybe 5-7 years ago. That's just not what it was. But the demand for these I guess unique, or I guess it comes down to a lot of times you have like big companies versus like small independent things, and bigger beer companies are always going to have their place. Like some people like them. There's nothing to say like those are bad beers. They're just different. But I feel like they probably tend to be a lot more safe or traditional in terms of like, because they want to appeal to as many people as possible. But like the ability with craft beers and craft beersmen, craft brewers, whatever the term would be, it's like they get the advantage of like, well, being a little crazy. Like, let's try like an apricot beer, or let's try like an oatmeal tasting beer.
Right.
And that really lets people kind of explore a different avenue for creation in terms of like, picking the ingredients and all that kind of fun stuff. So you mentioned, in the area, we're in Corona, bunch of breweries in the area. What would be, if you had to pick, and I don't know, this might be really difficult, but your top 3 breweries, like if you're like you only could drink from those 3 breweries for the rest of days, like what would do you have like a top 3 that you could subsist off of?
Well, my number one brewery that I found a few years ago that I really, really enjoy is The Brewery in Placentia.
Yes.
I think they're one of the leading breweries of trying crazy beers out there. I mean, they're doing beer wine hybrids. They're doing a ton of sour beers. They're doing one of their ones that they just recently released it's called Liter Cola.
Okay.
Where they're trying to capture the flavors of a soda and put it into a beer, but without the sweetness to it.
Okay.
So but they're always pushing the edge of interesting beer flavors. One of my favorite beers that they've brewed it's called horchata.
Oh.
It tastes just like it sounds. It tastes like the Mexican rice milk drink horchata, but it's with alcohol.
I love horchata.
Yeah.
I love. Where's my camera? I love horchata.
Yeah. So if you ever get a chance to try one of theirs, it is amazing.
That's where we met for the first time, right?
It is.
The brewery?
Yep.
Yeah. Looking off camera to my assistant, say who's my girlfriend. You can say hi. No one's looking. That might be picked up. I don't know. We'll find out. Yeah, they had some great beers there. Horchata beer sounds amazing. So shout out to the brewery. I'll probably link them too. I'm sure they have a website.
So the brewery, number 1, I would have to say Firestone Walker Probably my second favorite brewery. They do a lot of really interesting. They have a huge barrel program.
Okay.
So they do a lot of really interesting barrel-aged beers. And I really enjoy the flavors of beer. When you drink as much beer as I do, I enjoy drinking beers that don't necessarily taste like beer or push the boundaries of what a beer is supposed to taste like.
Yeah.
They have a lot of beers that have that. I really enjoy the heavy mouthfeel, dark fruit flavored beers. So you get a lot of that like date and pomegranate and like those really heavy, rich beer, flavors.
Yeah.
And they do a lot of really, really good beers out that way. Man, there's some really good ones down in Temecula. Weens and Black Market Brewing are really, really good. Ritual Brewing out in Redlands. It's really hard to decide on a number 3, but the brewery and Firestone Walker are probably my two favorite breweries, and then it's a tight race for third place.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, because a lot of it too is like if like we've been talking about, your taste can develop. I mean, maybe a few months you're like, I'm really into like this type of beer now, and such brewery has like a beer I'm all about. That's really cool. To be able to, I mean, being into beer and having like access to all these breweries in the area, and to really kind of go out and see what's out there and what's going on in the beer world, and kind of putting your toe in the water and seeing what you can do as well. So as like a home brewer guy, what would be when you first started, like if someone was like, hey Cliff, I'm gonna start beer and brew, like what is something that you wish maybe someone had told you before you had started? Maybe something that you encountered like, gosh, like I was not prepared for this situation, or maybe it's just like is it the time investment, or just I don't know the how much I guess care you need to take in choosing your ingredients. Like, is there something that maybe you remember when you first started, like, man, I wish I would have known about this beforehand, I could have prepared a little differently? Anything that springs to mind?
No, the first time I brewed beer, I went to my brother-in-law's a home brewer, and I went and watched him brew, and it gave me the basic idea of what brewing was, what it all entailed. And then so I started collecting all my equipment. I built a lot of my own equipment. I had him come down and help me with my first brew at home.
Yeah.
And
there might be a little munchkin running around the background, which is amazing. They're beer munchkins. They help. Yeah. They bring their beer out.
This is real home brewing.
It was like it's the true family brew. That's where the family comes from. It's a family process.
No, really. I did a lot of reading. I did a lot of research. I did a lot of looking for equipment. There wasn't really anything with brewing beer that caught me off guard. My recommendation for somebody who's interested in brewing at home would be to find a place locally that sells home brewing supplies.
Yeah.
Every single one of them that I know of does brewing demonstrations.
Okay.
So
really
go
cool.
down, go watch them do a home brewing demonstration, and then from there you can kind of ask questions. You can adjust how you want to brew your beer at home. I think total the initial investment for me was probably $300.
Oh wow, that's nothing.
Yeah. 300 total for all my brewing equipment, and then from there it cost me roughly anywhere between $30 and $50, depending on the beer that I'm brewing, for 5 gallons of it.
Wow.
So as far as if you have the patience to do it, you can save yourself a lot of money if you're going out and spending. I mean, it's nothing for me to go drop $60, $80, $100 on a few bottles of craft beer.
Yeah.
And so
make it at home.
Make it at home. Yeah.
Well, that's really cool. I mean, I guess, we live in an age where research is our greatest advantage in a lot of things. Because like, you want to go start brewing beer, you can go on the internet for 3 hours and probably learn everything you need to know. Or if you don't know how to do something, you can go online and probably find the answer within the first 2 or 3 minutes. And it's funny as an aside, I guess, but I've become more of a fan of beer in my quest to eliminate soda, because if you think about it, so this is my logic. In terms of like sugar content, I don't know the exact sugar content of a lot of beers, but it's probably pretty comparable maybe to a cup of soda. but you usually you get free refills on soda where you're paying for your beers. So if you're trying to watch sugar intake, it's going to hit your pocketbook a lot faster than the soda will. So there's a tip. If you're trying to cut soda, switch to beer. All right, Cliff. Well, I want to thank you for being on. I think we're going to wrap everything up. We're going to do some more shots as you kind of get the beer prepared. Maybe if you want, we can throw the recipe up just to kind of, if people are interested, like what you're using to make an oatmeal stout, if people want to try it at home.
Sure, yeah.
And once again, thanks for being on, and enjoyed a few more beers with you the rest of the day.
Yeah.
All
We're
right.
going to take a few more down before we get done with this. We still got a long way to go.
I know, we certainly do. Cool. Well, thanks everyone for hanging around. Feel free to email me at artistxartist@gmail.com or follow me on Twitter if any comments, questions, concerns. If you want to be on the show, I'm always looking for new talent. Go ahead and subscribe if you enjoy watching these. That helps too. And until next time, have a good day.